We have folks from Rowan University, Florida International University, Stevens College, and people all across the country. We're delighted to have you with us. My name is Dr. Julie Haynes. I am the director for the Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication at Rowan University. We are an affiliate of the Lillian Lodge Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication. And we are so happy to have Dr. Copenhagen with us today. Thank you, Dr. Copenhagen, for being with us. And we are celebrating Black History Month. We are so delighted to have two remarkable women with us today. I have worked with both Melissa Fox and Kha'Sadler professionally before, and being in their presence is always uplifting and a nourishment for the soul. So I am thrilled to have them. Today I'll be introducing both of our speakers today, and Dr. Fox is going to, Melissa Fox is going to be speaking about her book, and Dr. Sadler is going to be speaking, asking her questions about the book and other things. But first, let me introduce them. And I just want to mention again that it is, these are brief introductions. I encourage you to go to our website and read more about both of them. Before we get started, I did want to mention that our programming at the Copenhagen Center is available for participation and use by all interested individuals, regardless of any characteristic protected by law, including but not limited to race, color, national origin, sex, gender, age, and disability. All are welcome here, and we, again, are delighted to have you with us. We're going to be focusing, again, a celebration of Black History Month, and also going to be talking about communication strategies during stressful times. So let me introduce Melissa Fox. Melissa Fox is currently the Chief Operating Officer for Ascenda Integrated Health, and her current role as COO. Melissa oversees the operations and systems for over 100 programs throughout 12 counties in New Jersey. Ascenda is a behavioral health and social services agency which provides evidence-based programming in child welfare, prevention, juvenile justice, outpatient mental health, crisis services, substance use disorders, disorder treatment, and supportive housing. Melissa has a distinguished career for over 20 years. Leading innovations in integrated healthcare operations, and has been featured in numerous publications as an expert speaker for her work within diverse healthcare environments and addressing the importance of data in driving innovations within healthcare settings. She is on the board of numerous organizations, and I'm proud to say that she is also on the leadership council of our center here at Rowan. She's an adjunct faculty member for health administration at Wilmington University. And she was also presented with the 2018 Game Changer Award by the Gloucester County NAACP, and has been featured in South Jersey Journal as a top African-American leader in healthcare, as well as the 2019 Most Influential African-American. She has also been recognized as one of the 2021 and 2022 African-American women leaders in New Jersey by the South Jersey Journal. And she is the author of No Weapon Formed, an exploration of the Black woman's experience in America and how we can move toward healing together. And Melissa has actually, if you've been with the center for a while, you know that Melissa has done a previous virtual workshop with us on health communication. So we're really delighted today to have her to be speaking more about her book and her research in African-American women. And then we have as our moderator today, again, so appreciative of Dr. Kha'Sadler, who currently serves as the Associate Provost for Wellness and Inclusivity at Rowan. Dr. Sadler has a Doctor of Psychology degree in Clinical Psychology from Immaculata University, and began her career with the New Jersey Department of Children and Families within the Division of Child Protection and Permanency. Over the course of 10 and a half years, Dr. Sadler served as a case manager before transitioning to juvenile court liaison role for the remainder of her tenure. Throughout her work, she gained invaluable experience in child protection, child welfare, childhood trauma, juvenile delinquency, and the intersection of mental health and substance abuse in children and families. Her professional interests and clinical expertise include anxiety, depression, trauma, dating violence, romantic dating relationships, first generation low income students, diversity issues related to racial identity and development, spirituality, and religion. Dr. Sadler has presented her research at numerous local and national platforms and is the founder and owner of You Good Fam LLC, an initiative dedicated to fostering and advancing mental health and emotional well-being for all students with an emphasis on students of color. She is a proud mentor and advisor to several student clubs and organizations on our campus, and I know I speak for the entire Rowan University when I say that she is an asset to the university. So welcome, Melissa. Welcome, Kai. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so very much for the warm introduction. For a moment, I was thinking, wow, who is it that she is
Right?
speaking about?
Right.
Thank you so very much for the warm introduction, and to all of our attendees this afternoon. We are so grateful that you have taken time out of your schedule to be in community with us as we continue to uplift each other during this time in our lives. So, with that being said, I would be less than who I am as a clinician before we move forward specifically in the interview. If we didn't begin to ground ourselves, I don't know what your day has been like, what your evening has consisted of on last night or even later on today, and just really want to invite all of you to just simply ground yourselves just for a few moments. You can keep your eyes open or close, and I'll allow you just a few seconds to decide as we bring our attention very, very briefly to our breathing. And just simply noticing every inhale and every exhale. And on a count of three, just simply want you to breathe in through your nostrils and exhale out of your mouth. 1, 2, and 3. Inhaling through your nostrils and exhaling out of your mouth. And let's try that one more time on the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Inhaling through your nostrils and exhaling out of your mouth. And this time on the count of 3, I want you just to inhale what you believe that you need in this moment. That could be understanding, it could be patience, it could be love, whatever you identify that you need in this moment in your life. And then I want you to exhale what you believe you need to release. That could be stress, that could be frustration, it could be anger, it could be confusion, whatever would rise for you in this moment. So on the count of 3, inhaling what you need, and then exhaling what you believe that you need to release. On the count of 3, 1, 2, and 3. Inhale what you need, and exhale what you need to release. And now I'm placing your right hand onto your heart, continuing to extend to yourself the very things or thing that you need in this moment, on this day, to allow you to continue to move forward with passion, with purpose. Send yourself some good vibes. And whenever you're ready, you can slowly and gently begin to open your eyes or bring your gaze in an upward position as we move forward with our time. All righty, so here we are in community. Melissa Fox,
Yes. Yes.
woo-hoo!
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
certainly are glad to have you here at Rowan University. So let's jump in to our time. Feel free, our attendees to pose any questions that you may have in the chat. And in the introduction by Julie, she certainly referenced your book, that you are a author as well as a healthcare professional. So let's start off with you telling us about this book, No Weapon Formed. I mean, how powerful of a title is that? No Weapon Formed. So can you speak to us and share a little bit about this book, and how did you arrive at the title, and just even get into this point in writing this particular literature?
Yes, yes, yes. First up, thank you so much for that. And thank you to Rowan, my family, my Rowan family, who's always supported me and always gave me a place and a voice. So I appreciate all of you so much. And I just got to say, Dr. Sadler, you know, that exhale, breathing out everything that I don't need, I think I felt like one of those dragons, because I was going to be blowing fire for like the next 10 minutes for everything that I was trying to get out. So I think I have to do a part 2 of that breathing exercise, sister. So I'm going to follow up with you on that. But yeah, just in terms of that space is really what led me to write this book. And I think, you know, a lot of us have probably been in a place where we've had these moments of epiphany, aha, realization of this world around us and how it may be impacting us, but not really kind of digging into the why of that occurrence, or where you stand or sit or are laying in some cases at that point. And, you know, at a certain time in my life, I mean, we kind of just keep moving, right? We kind of keep just doing things, whether, you know, you're a Black woman, you know, whatever type of what, this for me as a Black woman, the space that I was moving in, I was carrying a lot and didn't realize how much I was carrying. And at a certain point, I got this aha moment with a health scare. And I was speaking to my doctor, and there were some things that he was sharing with me. And I said, wait a minute, you know, what is going on here? Why is this happening? What do you mean, you know, the stress? And I started talking to him about all these things that were happening to my body. And that just led me down a certain path of talking to a nutritionist and trying to understand how to reverse those things. And in those conversations, she was sharing with me some things I could do, but then really how chronic stress contributes to it. And what I realized, God, when I was sitting in that space was, I said, these are the things that I hear from so many women around me. Why am I hearing these recurring things over and over and over in terms of, you know, heart issues, diabetes, you know, can't sleep, stress. And yet there was this push to still keep moving, to kind of prove that even as these winds are blowing against me every day, even if I feel like I need to sleep, I can't. Even if I feel like I need to fall into a puddle of tears some days, I cannot allow myself to do that, and I have to still stay strong. I remember hearing that from women around me all, you know, the time that I was growing up. And I just really questioned myself, well, why is that? Where does this come from? Why is it that we feel that even in the midst of our pain and sorrow and trauma and all of this stressors that are going on, do we feel like we have to keep putting one foot in front of the other? Who says that has to be the case? And the fact that it's taking such a toll on our bodies, you know, what's that connection? So Kyle, that was it. I mean, it's really started down this journey of self-understanding, but not just self-understanding, understanding why there were women who looked like me and sounded like me and had my experiences. We were all aligned in what we were dealing with. And then because of the work that I've done in health disparities, there was so much just repetitiveness. And so that's where the book came from, just really understanding the why of that, and then exploring it, and then trying to find a reason or a way to help to address it.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like you know, you use the word epiphany, and you know, in this epiphany, it sounds as if you know, what was a priority, or what became a priority for you was your health, and it was more centered as a result of the I'm imagining the myriad of stress you know, that you were holding. And we certainly know in terms of research the impact that stress does have on us health wise, and even our brain functioning in forgetting things, whether that's, certain regions of the brain. So, it definitely says a lot and speaks to that even in the midst of what was adversity at that particular time, it was certainly an avenue that birthed this work. So we certainly appreciate, you know, an unfortunate situation, and yet the beauty that has come out of that. Um, Even though you didn't explicitly share, you indicated that you were carrying a lot and the necessity to stay strong.
Yeah.
And we certainly recognize as women, whether one identifies as a Black woman, and even in other, communities,
Right.
this phenomenon in terms of having to be strong. Can you say a little bit more from your perspective when you said that you had to stay strong? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, by the time that I finished writing this book, I was like, I told people, don't call me that. Don't say that, don't just paint me with that brush. Don't paint me with the magical brush, because I am a human. I want to be seen as human, and I have to respect and appreciate and uplift myself as a human being with time. I need to rest sometimes. So I think that trope of having to be strong, and especially when it's attached to Black women, the strong Black woman, I think that has done us a disservice over generations, because it does communicate that there's not room to rest, that there's not that forging forth, even though you're dying, forging forth in the storms of stress, that somehow that's a badge of honor. I remember hearing stories. I'm from Louisiana originally, and deep South Louisiana, and come from this amazing family of beautiful, strong women. And I look back at some of the things that they endured, whether that was in relationships, whether that was working 3, 4 jobs around the clock, never stopping, and still taking care of children, and still in that smiling and standing. And I said, I know, looking back, some of those traumas that they were dealing with and some of the stresses they were dealing with made them want to fall. But always I would hear this message: no, you can't stop. You need to be strong, and you have to be strong. And there's this expectation of that. So I think if we can get to a place of strength having its place, and there is a place for that, but then also understanding and giving ourselves permission and room to rest and to say no and to push back. No is not a bad word. No, when framed in the right context and spirit and personality and relationship and trust, can actually be something that's quite uplifting and quite, strengthening of relationships. It does not have to be a no as in a rejection of you, but this is a no as in it's an uplifting of myself, and it's establishment of boundaries. And I think so with the balance of strength and talking about strength, it's not bad to be strong. I'm working on my upper body strength. Apparently, that goes away as you get older. So strong is good. But there also is a place for it, and there's a place for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, because we, certainly are aware of the emotional and, the psychological and social burdens that Black women certainly hold throughout their lived and living experiences, and being able to understand that one can hold both, that I'm strong, and there are moments in which I may feel weak and not necessarily take on the identity that
Right.
I am weak.
That I
And
am
so,
weak.
exactly.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add something to that too. I'll bet if I did a quick poll of the women on this call, and men, you can take part as well, but I'm specifically, because there's a certain experience that I want to speak to. If I did a poll of the women on this call and asked you if you'd ever felt, especially women within a certain kind of experience and maturity, in terms of their ages, if I were to ask you how many times you felt that you wanted to cry or stop, or just, let's say cry, let's take it to that level, and you felt like you could not express that. You felt that you were in a place, in a relationship, in a setting, in a time, you could not show where you felt vulnerable. You could not show where you felt weak. That in itself is traumatizing to the individual. That in itself is not allowing your body to experience and respond to things in a healthy way. And Dr. Sadler, you can probably speak for, worlds around me in terms of the sympathetic and parasympathetic response and the chronic stressors and kind of keeping yourself in that space for a sustained amount of time. But what this does is kind of contributes to that. And so I'll bet if I did that poll, there would be many of you who would say, well, yeah, I did, but I couldn't because they would have seen me as weak, or that would have been seen as not strong. And I think that's the part that we have to claim liberty over and be okay with as we move forward, of course, to grow and to heal.
Sure. Because as we're aware, when we begin to inhibit our emotions and our experiences, as you started the interview discussing in terms of what led to you writing your book, the um, health challenges that we find ourselves experiencing and having. And oftentimes, I find myself thinking about what part and the correlation does that have and is linked to times in which we are inhibiting certain emotional experiences because of the different messaging, that we've received, whether it's from society, whether it's from our family systems, whether it's from educational systems in terms of how we are quote unquote supposed to show up and present, while also recognizing something that I hold on to, that every warrior needs rest.
Absolutely.
And, that is very important. So with this understanding, at least what you are exuding for me is, there are times where you've experienced peace as well as pain. And the pain again is what has manifested this book being birthed, No Weapon Formed. What strategies do you implement or have you implemented to maintain a sense of inner peace and clarity in the face of adversity?
Well, that's okay. Full disclosure, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And if you're not honest with yourself, if we're not honest with ourselves about that, and that's what I've committed to myself, especially going through this process with this book, I'm going to be honest with myself. If nobody else, I'm going to be honest with myself. And it is a learning process, but there are things kind of that I've learned to do to be able to, as I'm kind of moving in certain spaces. And I think you were saying are you saying kind of like just communicating or just kind of being like communicating with people or communicating in the sphere? I just want to make sure I'm answering this correctly.
It could be both,
Yeah.
others, and even just that internal dialogue. It could be both.
Yeah. So the first thing is to understand and try my best to clear away some of the smoke and the debris and all that and kind of get to what's really going on and what I'm really feeling and where that's really coming from, because there are different depending on the situation you're in, you're bringing your historical experiences, you're bringing your historical context, you're bringing what happened that morning on your way into work, you're bringing all these things in, and it's not easy to do in the snap of a moment when you're looking to respond, especially if you're carrying historical and familial traumas into your day-to-day walk. And so one of the things that I've done is, which I think anybody should do if you have the ability to, is to have a great therapist that you can connect to, because that's the ongoing maintenance and healing on an ongoing basis. I think that's important to do. I think that is something that I never used to think was super important, but I think it's important. So I invest into that in myself. The other proactive thing that I do is invest in self-care. So if I'm investing in self-care, and whether that means going to do a saltwater float, which I just found out about, that's fabulous. If anybody's ever done it, yep, I see Claire. Just learned about that. My sister Claire, introduced me to that. Fabulous. Or whether that just means sitting and watching a Marvel movie, in my basement, whatever that is to kind of bring myself down, but I'm investing in self-care. My body says I need it. So that when I'm going to those moments, Kai, when I go into those times where I'm being assaulted by what historically would have allowed me to act and respond a certain way, I have a little bit more built up in my reserve. So then I can be a lot more intentional about taking a moment and ask, what am I addressing here? Am I addressing this circumstance and this person and this issue? Or am I addressing the ex-boyfriend from, 35 years ago that really upset me. So who am I really talking to in this moment? And so once I'm able to kind of practice, and that takes practice, that takes time. And so once you're able to get to that point, and then it makes it a little bit easier to respond and work even within myself and with the person who I'm talking to or dealing with. It doesn't always work. And it's okay to give ourselves permission for it not to work sometimes. The key thing is to kind of come back and re-examine. If you do need to revisit with that person or with that situation, it's okay to do so. If it's just about you within yourself, go in and journal about it, or however you need to kind of work through it for you, so that the next time you show up a little bit differently, that could be helpful as well. And or taking it back to your therapist, like I will, and say, okay, this is what happened. I'm trying to kind of process through this. So a lot of it is kind of this combination of building up my reserves, so that when I come into those situations, because they're going to happen, where our traumas and everything are going to interfere and intervene with our day-to-day, how we're walking through life, build up your reserves. And then so when you're in that moment, doing your best to figure out and understand, am I addressing what's happening in front of me, or am I, addressing something else? And the other thing too is, and this is a lot of what I explored in the book, and that is that trauma is real. Traumas are real, and they float in underneath a lot of things that we do, and we're carrying them all the time. Addressing your trauma is extremely important, and your historical traumas are extremely important to be able to interact with the folks around you. And that could be any number of different types of traumas that we can get into, as you well know. So that's kind of the approach that I take.
Yeah, you've said a lot, and certainly it's landing for me in a lot of different and various ways. And my own experience, and part of the clinical training, it was required for us to have our own therapy. So definitely elevating the necessity and the beauty of being able to lean into a therapeutic relationship, and what and the benefits that it provides. And when I think about, as you were talking, the different and various systems, again, that we as women find ourselves navigating through, again, the educational system, judicial system, whatever that may look like, the healthcare system, and some of these experiences. And again, this can even tie back to the messaging of being a strong woman as a result of different imprints, that have been left on the soul. So whether that is stereotypes, whether that's microaggressions, whether that's this emotional labor, or whether that is, discrimination. I'm curious, from your perspective, what strategies would you consider, and you did allude to some, but what strategies would you consider most effective in helping Black women, women with other identities, navigate and even advocate for themselves in such situations?
Know your worth.
Mm,
Know your worth, number one. And if you know your worth, then you will celebrate your voice. So
mm,
know your worth and celebrate your voice. When you walk into these spaces, you wear your crowns, you walk in as though, because you do belong in the space that you're in. You are there for a moment, and you are there for a reason. So you walk into these spaces not feeling like you're apologizing for it, not walking into these spaces. And I did that a lot early in my career. Earlier in my career, Kyle, it's a lot of time with the, do I belong here? Am I in the room? Should I use my voice? Is there, maybe is it a mistake that I'm sitting in this chair? And there are times where I go through that now. Even with the things that I've done, and these moments of that. So, but I have to remind myself, no. I know my worth. And so if you know your worth, and then you also celebrate your voice, then you're able to move into a space that you're able to deal with these microaggressions differently. You're able to deal with some of these attacks that are subtle and sometimes not so subtle, in a different way and from a place of confidence, not from a place of fear. That's not easy to do. And that takes time. And what I will say, I think, I will give a shout out to some of these younger generations, because they seem to have it kind of done and clicking a whole lot more than some of us gray haired people are able to do. And I appreciate and celebrate that. And I learn from my daughters. My daughters are a lot more vocal about certain things than I am, and I think we can learn that from each other. So I would say that's one of the things that I do, because it's tough out here. It's tough out here many times. I can't even tell you that there have been times where I've sat in rooms and with my experience, with what I've done, and been very, I'm pretty good at what I do, and been sitting in a room with someone who doesn't look like me, maybe a different gender, and may say something. I'll go into this whole speech that's well researched and well presented, and it will land like a thud on the table, and then someone will come behind me and say something not as intelligent, maybe copied off of what I said, and it will be celebrated to the hills. And I took that, there were many times where I kind of took that, and it hurt me, because then I started re-examining myself. Where I am now, and what I would encourage everyone to do, if you don't already do it, is to, what I said at the beginning, to number one, know your worth. Know your worth. Because even when that happens, if you know your worth, you know that that's not about you. And then celebrate your voice, because then the next time you bring it back. Or like some of my daughters might sit in that room and say, oh, wait a minute, didn't I already, I think that's what I already said. And so, and not being afraid to do that. So that's the approach that I would take.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing attention to the difficulty in, for some individuals, celebrating who they are, um, embodying, knowing their worth, and that could be difficult if an individual is in a place where they are feeling worthless. And one of the things that you created that I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more about, this intersectionality trauma and stress assessment, because when we think about, or at least when I think about, there's a myriad of assessments, from a brief trauma questionnaire to a post-traumatic diagnostic scale, to be able to begin to assess trauma and stress, and what does that look like, and how has that shown up in the life of an individual. Everyone may not necessarily be in this place where they can embrace their worth, and one has to have an understanding in terms of where they are, to reach that particular point in their lives. So could you share a little bit in terms of the intersectionality trauma and stress assessment, and what that entails, and how did you even determine the factors to include in this assessment?
Yeah. So the reason I'm smirking is because all of my clinician friends, and you probably said the same thing, like, okay, wait a minute. This is evidence-based, how to, full disclosure, I'm not a clinician. But what I did, because I've worked in healthcare for so many years, to your point, how there are all these assessments, there are all these ways for people to determine if it's PHQ-9, GAD-7, whatever else you're using to determine your level of acuity or need related to certain issues and conditions and traumas and stressors. And as I was going through my experience, I'm like, well, and I was talking to, because if you've read the book, you see that I talked to different women in the book, and they were all saying the same things. But I'm like, how do you measure the degree to which your historical traumas have affected you? And there was nothing like that. There's something to determine if I had depression, these different things, but nothing like that. So I started looking at different assessments that were out there, and then also from what we touched on in the book and kind of the framework of it, and what I was hearing, to create something that was very brief, but that would give you at least directionally an understanding of what path do I now need to go down. So if my score is relatively high, then I may need to, and I think I said in the book, I may need to seek out additional counseling. Let me seek, or I may need to do some more self-care, just directional, like a dashboard, just directionally, where do I need to be leaning in? If I don't do anything else, if I don't have access to any of these other things, I have access to the ITSA, so I can at least understand how I need to support myself. Because it's something that I would have loved when I was in that really kind of dark moment before I wrote the book, and this space of what's going on, why is this happening, and started to go through my realization of all these things that were occurring around me. It would have been helpful to have something like this, if nothing else, just to do a quick touch point and pulse check of, kind of where I am and what's going on. So that's where it came from. And it's meant to be something that anybody can pick up and use, regardless of your, education level, regardless of your clinical knowledge. You can plug into it and just for yourself understand, where do I probably need to go next. So that was the origin of it. I'm hoping that it's helpful. And I did, use it on, several members in my sorority and, folks around me, just to kind of get them to check it, to see how they felt about it. And they did seem to receive it well. So I'm hoping that it's of help to others.
So, those who have completed the assessment, and I'm gonna just say their scores were, relatively high. From your perspective as a leader in healthcare and advocacy, like what communication strategies have you found, most effective for those who are navigating high stress situations?
So, um, it depends on the person, it depends on the circumstance. The high stress situations, you see me hesitating because it can run the gamut. If you are someone who is in an abusive situation, and my apologies for anybody, that might be kind of triggering. If you're in a situation where, it's your studies are, really piling up on you and it's just a lot, you feel a lot of pressure from home, communicating is difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to kind of move your way through that space. And if you take the ITSA, for instance, and you find that there's a significant amount of trauma, or you're at risk for a lot of that, trying to get your voice heard or communicated properly requires some additional support. And that's just my recommendation. It's not something that you can do alone. It is not something that I could have navigated through alone. So the traumas that I brought to the table, and there was a lot. I mean, if I kind of, list all the stuff, it wasn't just the regular kind of work stuff. It wasn't just the kind of, regular kind of family stuff. I mean, there was some heavy, heavy things that I was dealing with at the time, in addition to bringing a lot of my historical stuff to the table as well. And so it was difficult to communicate through that. So what I would say is, if you are in that space and you have scored high on the ITSA, then that says that there are traumas, especially if you are in multiple groups. And that's why it's the intersectionality, because it's not just, you're not just one type of, identify as one type, one race or ethnicity, but you're this race and ethnicity, perhaps this gender, and et cetera. So it's intersectionality. So it just really shows that those issues are multiplied. So if you score high, a communication strategy that can be used, there are many that you can use, but it can only be done if you are in a safe space and that you are feeling safe and nurtured yourself. I can't overemphasize how it has to come from that place. I needed to do that. Like now, I can talk about these things, and I can be in these settings, and I can hopefully communicate and make a strong case, and for many different things. But I don't think that I would have been able to do that if I had not healed or started healing for myself. I can now say with no fear of vulnerability, oh, I was wrong. But I never used to be able to do that. I could say I could be sitting in that meeting. I could be sitting in that professional setting and have someone speak over me, right? Drown my voice out so that almost to not have me be heard. And I can sit for a beat, almost be amused by it, because again, I know my worth. Almost be amused by it, and then come back and say, well, thank you for that, but let me reemphasize this point, because I celebrate my voice. So the only way that you can do that, if you score high with those traumas, and that trauma assessment, is to begin working on healing those traumas, and then that'll allow you to better have the voice that you want to have.
So we were in person, I would put their microphone to you, because you certainly have no problem, what I'm sensing, being able to amplify your voice, being able to assert your needs. And we also know that there are, some women, for different and various reasons, who have challenges, and they struggle, with asserting themselves, being able to put voice, to their experiences as well as their needs. And, I'm curious, from your perspective, what advice do you have for individuals who are struggling to speak up for themselves in professional or personal settings, especially in moments of crisis, whatever that may mean for individuals?
First, I'd say this, everybody is not the same personality. So everyone is not going to be that person that is, pounding the table and is speaking over everyone and is, loudly projecting their thoughts and experience. So you do not have to feel that that has to be your form of communication. Your form of communicating how you feel is, could be different. So I just want to start out with that so I kind of level set. So when you say, speaking up for yourself, that looks different in different people. So speaking up for yourself can be the folks like myself who may be kind of loud in a certain setting. But there could be someone who that's just not their personality and they're just more soft-spoken. Find a way to advocate for yourself. So even if the words don't come the way that you want them to in that setting, there are ways to advocate for yourself. There are ways to very quietly and firmly stand to your position. So if you're in those settings, especially a professional setting, and you have some blowhard that's next to you and kind of over talking everyone in the meeting, and you can strategically angle yourself so that you're speaking to the right person, that you're maybe taking it outside of the meeting if you need to. You can use other communication strategies. You can write, you can craft something that is a document that clearly presents what you have to say. The key is not to feel that the barrier that is perceived is actual. The barrier sometimes that we feel, to your point, that we feel that we can't have a voice and that we feel that we can't communicate, that's but film, that's but paper, or this mist, that is not a real thing, even though it feels very real to all of us, right? Me as well. It feels very heavy. So it's about finding out, what can you do to communicate your point and make sure that you are heard. And if you are in that setting, and if you're in that professional setting in real time, you need to make sure that your voice is heard. If you're someone who just, who doesn't want to wait your turn and speaks up, and do that. In that space, it's yours, do that. Because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I mean, quite frankly, I think that's kind of where I got to. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You say you have your voice. The second thing is, if it's not your personality, of course, to communicate using these other ways. We have various ways to communicate. And I say that find what works for you, push through that mist that seems like it's keeping you from, presenting your position and presenting your case. But just stay true to it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Sometimes I'm aware that, um, sometimes we as individuals can find ourselves having a level of apprehension and fear, um, because there are consequences, that one certainly can have as a result of speaking up.
Mhm.
And of course, those consequences could vary depending on, the setting, what
The
explicitly is
situation,
being
situation.
exactly
That's
being
correct.
said.
That's right.
So I'm just, wondering, um, what suggestions or recommendations would you have for people in marginalized communities who are struggling with the fear of navigating professional communication, even in our current times?
Yeah,
Uh, because I'm also of the mindset that every opinion isn't always meant to be expressed.
that is.
So I'm just curious in terms of there may be some fear that individuals are holding because of the potential consequences that may follow.
Thank you for that question, because that's real now. I mean, the other stuff that I said is very much general, kind of in somewhat sane times. But right now, I think we're in a very different kind of space. And if you are from historically marginalized communities, where there's already been this kind of perception of when you speak. Let's look, I'm going to be real in this space. As a Black woman, I was afraid to speak for a very long time because I was afraid that I'd be perceived as aggressive. And I was actually told that by one of my supervisors early in my career. She pulled me aside. She said, you're doing a great job, and she literally said this, you're really not going to go that far. You really need to tone down your personality because you seem a little aggressive. And that affected me so much that for years, I adjusted my personality, and I was miserable. I adjusted my personality in workspaces that was not in a way that wasn't authentically me. And so I'm thankful, but that really did impact me. I'm thankful now that I've kind of come out of that. But where we are right now, that is real. Even now, when I sit in certain rooms, I know that I have to be strategic in my voice. It's okay to be strategic. Strategic doesn't mean um, cowardice. It's not what that means. Strategic means exactly what it says, that you are understanding the circumstances that you happen to be in that moment, and that you are using the proper kind of communication, angle of communication, type of communication, to be able to communicate what you need to have communicated. The important piece is to understand that you have a voice. You're strategic about how you communicate what you need. If you use the example of anywhere else in your life, we adjust and calibrate to the circumstances. This time that we're in right now, and I'm especially speaking to these folks, the folks who are going into these spaces, and you're already caring and wondering, especially as a Black person, Black or brown person, if you're going into these workspaces, there are people who have preconceived notions already when you walk through the door. And so when you come in, it is important to know that, number one, again, I'm going to keep going back to it because this is my North Star. I deserve to be there. I deserve to be there, and I celebrate my voice. And everything else after that is just, okay, so how do I now strategically make sure that I'm heard? How do I strategically make sure that I'm getting through to whomever needs to hear it, what needs to be said? Because even if they don't hear it, for me, it is important that I had my voice heard, because there will be people who won't, and that's what it is. But you continue and you move forward and you continue to celebrate your voice and know your worth. So there's no easy answer to that, because I don't think there's one size fits all. There can't be. The biggest thing that I would say, and what I use, and hopefully it works for everybody else, is to be strategic and understand the space that you're in. Be okay with the fact that there have to be nuanced conversations, and that's okay. But keep that other piece where your understanding of who you are and your worth. But it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's definitely the complexity in terms of how can one remain who they are authentically,
Yep.
and at the same token, recognizing, as my mom, who is deceased, would often say, there's a time and place for everything. So again, that's where I think about, not every opinion is always meant to, be expressed. In that particular
That
context,
moment. Yep.
exactly, or even in that moment, but it certainly can be challenging if it is inconsistent or incongruent with an individual's values. And then of course that's when we know, in terms of this cognitive dissonance,
Yep.
that can begin to happen. I'm showing up, engaging in one way, when in all actuality that's just not my belief. So it really begins to wear on the heart, the spirit, the mind of individuals. So it goes back to one of the things that you shared in terms of knowing your worth,
Right.
and at the same token that some individuals may be on the spectrum in terms
Mhm.
of still navigating, what does that actually mean, given my lived and living experiences that have certainly eaten away and have sent messages that
Yes.
question my worth. Um,
And, can I
Please.
just add something to that real quickly? Because if we haven't dealt with that, then your traumas, and I'll just speak for myself, because of the background that I grew up in, it was very, very difficult for me to hear somebody tell me I was wrong and try to shut me down. Very, very difficult. And that may not have been what they were doing, but I would react to it a certain way. And so but that was a trauma. So to be able to, be in these certain settings, to your point, and understand and build up my reserves and heal myself, that allowed me to better be able to navigate the nuances of different types of conversations. So that has to be first.
Yeah. I recognize that we're coming a little bit towards our time to end, but I'm just thinking about we talked a lot in terms of the impact that stress can have, physiologically, even from a neurological perspective, how to navigate and embrace, who you are as an individual with it not being at the expense of or even compromising your overall well-being as an individual. So if there was one key takeaway, so to speak, that you would hope the audience would leave with regarding the power of communication, and even during stress, what would that be? What would that one takeaway be?
Probably some version of what I've said multiple times, only because it's so important, and that is that your voice matters. Your voice is important. I think if we understand that, and now that doesn't mean, to your point, let me just kind of clarify, that doesn't mean that everybody has to hear every single thing that you're thinking at every single moment. That's not what that means. What that means is that, when you're in these spaces, especially if you're communicating on a professional level, that your space in that room is ordained. I mean, you're supposed to be there. And so that's not a gift that somebody gave to you. That's not something that you didn't earn. That you have a voice when you're in that space. And so if I didn't have, if it's something that I wish I would have heard when I was younger, and when I was younger in my career, would have been somebody putting their arm around me and saying, it's okay. You have room here. You have a room to speak and communicate and engage however you want to. You have worth. And so the other thing I would say, just kind of a part B to that, is to plug into someone else. If you feel that you're in those spaces and you're not heard and you're not respected, seek someone out. They may not be working in that place. I celebrate the fact that I get to work with, other young sisters who will call me and connect with me and, kind of get different feedback. Find somebody who you trust, and who you can go to help to build that reserve and that strength, because that's the one thing that I think everybody should take away from this, that your voice truly, truly does matter in these spaces.
Yeah. So what I'm also hearing, tying it somewhat to the title of your book, no weapon formed. So these weapons, whether they're external weapons or even these internal weapons that we don't even realize that we are inflicting upon ourselves, and how we begin to internalize. And I'll just take it a step further, almost kind of the sense of no weapon formed, making every effort that it does not become penetrable, that it does not prosper in such a way that you begin to take on the spirit, the identity of these different and various messages, from systems or, family and even your own belief system, that again, that can begin to rot at the spirit and the core, in terms of who we are as individuals. So my last question for you, at least in this moment, what can we expect from you in the future, or is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience this afternoon?
From one day to the first of all, I'm still doing some amazing work in the communities, involved with lots of different organizations, because I think that it's important, and that's the spirit of kind of one of the things that was in this book. Our health has to be priority. Our health and taking care of ourselves, some of these preventable illnesses and diseases, and even the stresses that contribute to those, has to be, addressed in a very cohesive and compassionate way. So that's what I'm doing. I mean, I will continue to do that. So you might see my face pop up here and there. involved in different things. There's some work that I'm trying to do at the state level right now that's pretty cool. But that is what I'm doing, and that's what I would encourage everybody else to continue to do. And I'm just thankful to be in this space right now, and this space in my life, this space in my health, and this space at least in understanding my worth, and that helps to contribute to my work.
Thank you so much for sharing how you are embodying well-being from an emotional perspective, from a communal perspective, even driven by purpose. So those who are on this call, I certainly would encourage you to commune with your own heart and recognize that no matter what the messages that are coming your way externally or internally, that you make every effort to not allow these weapons, and only you can identify what those weapons are, hinder you from being able to show up, to speak up and out regarding issues that certainly can begin to be burdensome, that can begin to bring a level of weariness, because it's certainly our desire for each and every one of us on this call to be well. So I say to all of you, may you be well, may you be well, may you be well, and no weapon formed shall be able to prosper. So I will now turn things over to Julie, or if there are other questions that others would like to pose to Melissa. I know we have 2 minutes and certainly want to remain within our time boundaries. But again, Julie, if I was not
We,
to say
we,
that,
no, you're great. We're an hour and 15 minutes. So we have, a few more minutes.
oh,
If we have questions first, let me take some moments to say thank you and amen and amen and amen. I appreciate you both so much. I am inspired, as I know I'm seeing in the comments how inspired and touched everyone is. So thank you both so much for being with us and speaking with us today. We do have a few minutes if you do have some other questions. If I can indulge myself and really make a comment, I guess, in sort of a question, I think it's so important, and knowing your voice, knowing your worth, celebrating your voice, and also what we've been talking about is being in community with others who understand you. I think is so important, and I will just be vulnerable and out myself for a second. Like before this call, I was having a lot of stress. I'm not sure Dr. Sadler did the grounding just for me. I won't be that conceited, but I knew she knew. She was like, okay, Julie needs some grounding because, when I got on the call, I was not okay. But I will say that it was so wonderful to have, and Karen was on the call as well, Breaker, who's our program assistant, but Melissa and Kai, and knowing that I was in a safe space to just sort of be like, okay, real quick, I'm not okay. And to have them be like, it's okay not to be okay. And also calm down, is also like, let's ground ourselves because there are so many changes going on in the world right now for all of us. Academics in particular are not, I don't want to say in particular, but that is one of my communities. So I think it's interesting when you have all of the areas of your life are stressful too. I think that also, like, we can keep the balls in the air, but when one kind of flies out, like our family life, or when they're all kind of crazy. But I just wanted to reiterate that idea that being in community and surrounding yourself with like-minded people that you can be. I loved that idea of being yourself. I had a job for years also where I couldn't be myself. So I think those are just incredible words of wisdom. I know we had a question before in the chat that I don't see anymore. I don't know if it got accidentally deleted, but this notion, it related to your idea of being strong, the strong Black woman trope, like this idea of being a survivor. Can you, both of you, speak a little bit about how the word survivor is both a blessing and a curse, or what kinds of opinions do you have on that?
You know, it's interesting because and I don't think I thought about it that way until this moment, kind of explored that in myself, the difference between how I feel about the word survivor versus strong.
Right, right,
You know, you see, you're kind of thinking about it as well, because to a
right.
certain degree, I look back at the women in my family who have endured so much, you know, my mom and my grandmother, great grandmother, and they did survive, but I guess I wouldn't leave it at just surviving. I would leave it at thriving, at a certain point, because they were able to come through, forge their way through, and come out on the other side and still build these wonderful things. You know, the part that and Kyle, we'll kick it to you, because the part that I have I guess the not so great feeling about, or the resentment for, if I can find that word for it, is the fact that they even had to endure what they had to endure. And, you know, that their internal, you know, kind of barometer or whatever kind of told them, well, I have to survive this. I got to move forward. So I appreciate them for it, and I love them for it. And I'm hoping that my daughters and, you know, grandchildren appreciate and love me for it. I appreciate and love that they did it, but I resent part of me that they have to be seen as survivors. So it is kind of this. I don't know how I feel about it. Kat, what do you think? I see you're looking up at, yeah, you kind of have the same feeling, right? Like,
I really appreciate that question, Julie. It's
yeah,
full, because I'm thinking about, when I hear the word survival, I'm connecting it to struggle.
yes,
Right.
And in that, I'm not exempt from struggle. I'm not exempt from hardship. That's part of the human experience that's going to forever be with me. And even in those moments of, survival and struggle, there are those moments and times where I'm going to emerge. And in that, emergence is connected to empowerment, or this sense of, being resilient. And I think, at least from my perspective, it ties back to what you were sharing, Melissa, in the context of, knowing your worth, but even taking it a step further, from the perspective of having ethnic pride. And in this ethnic pride, recognizing and embracing and celebrating the heritage and the customs and the traditions that we have in our respective ethnicities. So that certainly is what helps me feel victorious, even in the midst of times when I feel like I'm in survival mode. Because I don't think that that can ever or will ever escape me, because that's just part of, at least from my perspective, the human experience.
Can we use that word instead?
I love it.
I like victorious better than
I
survivor.
love it, right?
I like that much better. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you think about it, even in, I'm like a word scholar, like communication, that's just kind of rhetoric and what we study. And even if you think like cancer survivor, like
Right.
that person has survived it, or a domestic abuse survivor. But if you're like, I am victorious over cancer, I am
Yes.
victorious over
Yes.
the hardships I have faced in my life.
Yes.
It just shifts it in such a beautiful way.
Yes. So we are not survivors, we are victors. And I mean, that's biblical, and that has so much to it. And
Mhm.
it's okay. I'm done. So that's what I'm going to do, Kyle, for now on. Julie, we are survivors. We're not survivors. We
We're
were survivors, but
victors.
now we are victors, and we are victorious. I love that.
I love it. I love it as well. I think we should end on that note of go be victorious in your lives and in your days. Thank you for communing with us today. Thank you again to Kai and Melissa for being open and honest and all of your wisdom. Thank you to Dr. Copenhaver for being here and facilitating these communities that we have together. If you have any questions about the center or any of its events, you can email me at haynes@rowan, haynes.edu. Other than that, go have a wonderful day and go be victorious.
Thank you all so much for joining and have an amazing day and week.